On November 13, 1820, American sailor Henry Palmer and his crew stepped onto an isolated island near the Antarctic peninsula, an island he would later name Deception Island. From the moment his boots touched the black volcanic shore, an unusual chill ran through him. Palmer had landed on countless coasts throughout his life, yet none had ever given him such a sharp sense of unease. As he scanned the barren landscape, he felt without reason that unseen eyes were fixed upon him. He knew the island was supposed to be empty except for wildlife, yet something in the air whispered otherwise. Twilight was approaching, so Palmer ordered his men to set up camp above the high tide line, planning to begin exploring at dawn. Every morning on new terrain, Palmer insisted on a strict head-counter habit born from years of traveling into the unknown. And that first morning, as he lifted his tin cup of coffee, a panicked shout split the cold air. Norris and Clark are gone. Palmer sprinted to their tent. Both men had vanished without a trace. He immediately divided the crew into 4 armed search parties. Taking 2 men with him, Palmer followed a stretch of beach leading toward a cluster of jagged rocks. As they discussed possibilities, Palmer reminded them of a rule he never allowed to be broken. No one was to leave camp without reporting to him or the first mate, George, even for simple tasks like relieving themselves. Unknown lands held unknown dangers. Soon they stopped. Human footprints marked the sand. Beside them lay scraps of clothing belonging to one of the missing sailors. Even more disturbing were long drag marks carved across the sand, as if something or someone had been pulled toward the rocks. Ahead, a dark cave waited at the base of the outcropping. Palmer stood completely still, his eyes fixed on the mouth of the dark cave carved into the rocks. The entrance seemed to breathe cold air, as if something inside was alive and waiting. Though he was an experienced sailor who had faced storms, shipwrecks, and the unforgiving open sea, this moment brought him a fear he could not explain. His 2 companions quietly stepped beside him, gripping their rifles tightly. Before entering, Palmer leaned down to examine the sand. The drag marks ended directly at the cave's threshold. Whatever happened to Norris and Clark? It led them inside, he murmured. No animal he knew left marks like these. The grooves were long, uneven, and strangely deliberate, almost as though hands had pulled something heavy. With lanterns raised, the men moved into the cave. The walls were smooth and wet, reflecting the dim light. A smell of damp stone mixed with something metallic floated through the air. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the cave swallowed sound rather than carrying it. Palmer motioned for silence, listening for any hint of movement. Nothing, not even the drip of water. A few yards deeper, the passage split into 2 narrow tunnels. Palmer examined both paths carefully. On one side, faint scratches marked the stone, thin and straight to be made by claws. He touched them gently. They were fresh. Suddenly, a distant sound echoed from far inside the right-hand passage. It was faint, but it made all 3 men stiffen. It resembled a human voice, weak, strained, and muffled, like someone calling out from behind layers of rock. "Did you hear that?" one of the crew whispered, trembling. Palmer nodded, tightening his grip on his lantern. "Stay close," he ordered, "and no one wanders off." Together they stepped deeper into the unknown. The deeper they moved into the tunnel, the narrower the passage became. Their lantern light flickered across the slick walls, stretching shadows into long, distorted shapes that swayed with every step. Palmer kept his breathing steady, though tension crawled up his spine. The weak voice they had heard earlier had gone silent, leaving only an oppressive stillness that pressed on their ears. After several minutes, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. At first glance it looked empty, but Palmer noticed disturbed dust on the floor, as if someone had recently stumbled through. He crouched and ran his fingers across the marks' footprints, smudged and overlapping. Some were clearly human, others were not. Elongated imprints with uneven spacing circled the chamber like something had moved in erratic, dragging motions. Palmer stood slowly. "They came through here," he whispered, "but they weren't alone." One of the sailors shivered. "Sir, are you sure this island has no inhabitants?" "That's what every chart says," Palmer replied. "But charts don't always tell the whole truth." Just then, a low rumbling vibrated through the ground. The lantern flames trembled. From a tunnel on the far side of the chamber came another sound, this time unmistakable. A groan, human, pained. Palmer signaled the men to follow and rushed toward it. But as they approached the narrow opening, a sharp metallic scent filled the air. Blood, the walls were streaked with thin smears. Still wet, Palmer felt a cold knot form in his chest. Inside the passage, they found a torn piece of fabric hanging from a jagged rock part of Norris's coat. Beneath it, the dirt was disturbed in a violent pattern, as though a struggle had taken place. The groan came again, weaker than before. "Hold your lantern up," Palmer ordered quietly. They stepped forward, bracing themselves for what lay ahead in the darkness. They followed the faint groans deeper into the narrow passage until the air grew heavier and colder, almost difficult to breathe. Palmer's lantern illuminated only a few feet ahead, leaving the rest swallowed in thick shadow. The metallic scent of blood grew stronger with every step. One of the sailors gagged quietly, but Palmer motioned him to stay silent. Whatever was ahead of them, human or not, didn't need to know they were frightened. The tunnel abruptly ended at a cramped cavern. Palmer raised his lantern high, and the dim light revealed a horrific sight. Against the far wall lay Norris, slumped on his side. His clothes were torn, and long crimson streaks covered his arms and chest. His face was pale, eyes half open, lips trembling as he struggled to form words. Palmer rushed forward and knelt beside him. "Norris, can you hear me?" he asked urgently. Norris's eyes flickered. His voice was barely a whisper. It took Clark deeper, dragged him away. What took him? Palmer pressed. An animal. A person. Norris's fingers twitched, attempting to point toward a dark crevice on the left side of the chamber. "Not human," he rasped, body shaking. Before Palmer could ask more, a sudden noise echoed from the crevice, a scraping sound, like something rough sliding across stone. The sailors stiffened, rifles raised. Palmer leaned closer to Norris, attempting to move him, but his injuries were severe. "We can't leave him here," one sailor whispered. "No," Palmer agreed. "But we can't stay here either." The scraping grew louder, closer, as if something enormous was shifting its weight just out of sight. A low, guttural exhale drifted from the darkness, sweat rattling, and undeniably alive. Palmer felt his pulse hammer. "Light, steady," he whispered. "Whatever's in there, it's coming." The cavern fell into a tense silence, broken only by Norris's shallow breaths and the ominous scraping echoing from the crevice. Palmer steadied his lantern, sweeping the beam across the jagged opening. The darkness inside seemed unnaturally thick, as if it absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. His two sailors positioned themselves on either side, rifles trembling slightly in their hands. The scraping paused. Then came a new sound, slow, deliberate tapping, like hard nails or bone striking stone. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike echoed sharply through the cavern, raising goosebumps along Palmer's arms. Norris flinched, clutching weakly at Palmer's sleeve. "V. No, don't let it take me again," he whispered feverishly. Palmer swallowed hard. "You're safe now. We'll get you out of here." But even as he said it, the tapping grew louder, followed by a low rumbling growl that vibrated through the rock. Palmer exchanged a look with his men. Whatever lurked inside that crevice was approaching. Suddenly, a shadow shifted deep within the darkness. Not the size of a man. Larger, much larger. A broad shape moved forward, the faint outline barely visible. Long limbs, hunched posture, an emotion unlike any animal Palmer recognized. One of the sailors took an involuntary step back. The creature stopped abruptly, letting out a chilling, raspy inhale, almost as if it was sniffing the air. Sniffing them. Palmer made a decision. "We're leaving now." He grabbed Norris under the arms. The injured man cried out softly, but they lifted him as gently as they could. The sailors backed toward the tunnel, lanterns shaking. Behind them, the creature exhaled a wet, rattling hiss that echoed through the cavern like a warning. Palmer didn't look back. "Move," he ordered, as they began retreating into the tunnel with the thing following close behind. Palmer moved quickly, dragging Norris with all his strength while the two sailors followed closely. Rifles ready but hands trembling. Every step echoed unnaturally in the tunnel, bouncing off the damp walls. The creature's breathing, or whatever it was, grew louder behind them. A wet, rattling sound that made Palmer's stomach churn. He kept his eyes forward, refusing to glance back, but he could feel its presence looming, patient, relentless. The injured man whimpered softly, trying to speak, but Palmer hushed him. "Quiet. We can't let it hear you panic." Norris nodded weakly, shivering, while clutching at Palmer's coat. The cold air stung their lungs as they pushed deeper into the cavernous tunnels, every shadow threatening to leap out at them. The lanterns flickered, sending monstrous shapes dancing across the walls. Palmer's heart pounded in his chest. He had faced storms, shipwrecks, and war, but nothing had prepared him for this. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a jagged chamber. The moonlight from above or some faint natural light streamed through cracks in the rocks, offering a fleeting sense of hope. Palmer signaled the men to pause and catch their breath. The creature had stopped just at the mouth of the previous tunnel, its silhouette barely visible, hunched and still, as if it were calculating its next move. The hiss subsided, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against their ears like thick fog. Palmer took a deep breath. "We have to move faster. Norris won't survive long if we slow down," he said. The sailors nodded, fear evident in their eyes, but determination in their grip. Carefully, they maneuvered over sharp rocks and uneven ground, trying not to trip, carrying the man as silently as possible. Every instinct screamed to run, but Palmer knew any sudden move might trigger the creature to attack again. With each step, the oppressive sense of being watched grew stronger, an invisible weight pressing down on them, urging them to leave the island and never return. The three men, exhausted and trembling, finally emerged from the winding tunnels into the pale, icy light of dawn. The air outside was frigid, biting at their faces and hands, but it felt safer than the oppressive darkness behind them. Palmer lowered Norris gently to the ground, checking him for signs of life. The injuries were severe, but he was still breathing. Relief washed over Palmer for only a moment before he remembered the red stone's mysterious, brilliant, crimson fragments scattered throughout the cave. He had kept them untouched, yet their strange presence haunted him. Palmer gathered his men. "We leave this island immediately," he commanded. No supplies, no investigation, nothing, just go. His crew, still pale and shaking, complied without question. As they trudged across the volcanic shore, Palmer cast one last glance at the dark silhouette of the cave. Something ungodly had dwelt there, and he knew with certainty that nothing human or perhaps nothing alive in any normal sense had caused the horrors inside. When they returned to their small boat, the sailors refused to speak of what had transpired, each man lost in his own thoughts. The wind howled around them as the island faded into the distance, a jagged shadow against the horizon. Palmer had named it Deception Island in the hope of warning future sailors, yet he feared no chart or name could ever truly prepare anyone for what lay within. Decades later, the story resurfaced. Australian scientists in 1957 who set foot on the island experienced horrors that echoed Palmer's account: colleagues disappearing, rooms drenched in blood, and the same enigmatic red stones scattered across floors and beds. Among them, Richard McCre finally broke his silence years later, recounting how skinless figures had attacked, leaving the survivors terrified and alone. The Australian government had kept much of the ordeal secret, adding to the island's terrifying legend. Palmer never returned. McCre never set foot there again. Deception Island remained a place of mystery and dread, abandoned research stations and uninhabited shores standing as chilling reminders. Some places on Earth are meant to be left alone, untouched, and feared.